Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, who's going to get a raise, and will they give it back? That and, natural gas production in Pennsylvania, is it going to go up or down? That and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Joining me as often is the case of two of Harrisburg, the Capital's leading reporters, John Micek with the Allentown Morning Call. He's sitting right there. And Brad Bumsted with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. All right, gentlemen, let's go to the big news of the day. The big news of the day is now we have Lieutenant Governor Scarnati, former state senator. He's still a state senator. John, explain all of that. How can you be both a state senator and a lieutenant governor?
Thanks to the miracle of the state constitution, right? When Lieutenant Governor Catherine Baker Knoll died, Senator Scarnati, who was then the president pro tem of the Senate under the right of succession, moves in to the lieutenant governor's office, but occupies his old Senate job at the same time. The question, of course, becomes which of the two salaries he's going to take: the higher lieutenant governor's salary, or keep his lower Senate salary. He's indicated that he wants to keep his that he might take the lieutenant governor's salary because he's got the increased duties, but state's finances being what they are, who knows?
Who knows? Now, Brad, one of the interesting things about this is that we've never had, at least as far as I could determine, now you all have done a lot of reporting on this, lieutenant governor Republican, governor Democrat. The last time we had this situation with Senator Jubileer, Republican, Tom Ridge, governor, Republican, no problem. This is a pretty unusual situation. In fact, we've had it before. Are there implications for this, do you think, for policy making and for how things will function in Harrisburg?
Well, ostensibly, no, given that the lieutenant governor doesn't really have any duties beyond ceremonial duties of running the Senate. Yeah. But I think that there's a possibility for some occasional flashes, let's say, of partisanship over this. If you remember back to the 1989 tax reform debate, the year before when it was pending in the state Senate, Mark Singal, who was then lieutenant governor and was presiding over the Senate, was able, through a very quick ruling at the end, get Casey's tax plan through, a procedural maneuver. And I think there are instances like that where it's really close, where, Scarnati might be able to do that. I think they have to be very careful, though, politically, and not to appear that they're feuding all the time or fighting. And I don't think we'll see that kind of outward.
Do you think then that look, let's be candid about this, as you guys have written a lot of stories about this. The Republicans in the Senate in particular have been more difficult for Governor Rendell and his agenda. Now the Democrats control the House, so presumably they'll be able to marshal the votes there. And we want to talk a little bit about a House situation in a moment. But is the Senate, you think, continue to be the foil for Governor Rendell as we move into the
particularly since they've increased their majority coming off this last election. It's 29-20 now. It was pretty unassailable before, but it seems even more secure now. So that's going to be the place where if bills go to die, that's where it's going to happen.
And they become the last bastion defense against tax increases, which the governor says he's trying to avoid, and he's approaching the budget crisis with spending cuts. But as this moves into next year, I think it's inevitable that we'll probably be talking about some type of tax increases at the state level. And the Senate Republicans have said no tax increases, but depending on how bad it is, do they hold to that or not?
Yeah, and they have to obviously have a balanced budget. And in 2003, when Governor Rendell took office, there was a deficit, actually a fairly small deficit. I can't remember. Maybe one of you two will remember the exact amount. But we did have a state income tax hike, right?
Right.
That's right.
And in the
10%.
Yeah, 10%. In the two previous recessions, we had tax hikes. So, but John, would you agree with Brad? The Senate will probably be the place where he'll run into their toughest Senate Republicans, obviously.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's go to the other subject of the day, which is the House Democratic leaders saying they intend to give back the 2.8% pay hike COLA that they were automatically guaranteed as a result of a state law passed in 1995. Pressure on a lot of other lawmakers to give that 2.8 back, Brad?
Well, sure it is. on the other 3 caucuses and on other Democratic members. I'm sure there'll be some who won't do it, and it's going to be very hard to tell and to trace that. I mean, you know, because there's this misnomer out there that a legislator can refuse to accept the raise, and that's not true. Under state law, as adjudicated by the state Supreme Court, they have to take the raise and then be taxed on it, and then they can give a check back to the Treasury. And that occurred as a result of a case where Superior Court Judge Joan Oring Melvin tried to, she sued and said, I don't want to take the raise. Finally, the Supreme Court said, sorry, you gotta. And as a result, she's taxed on it and continues to pay.
I mean, what's amazing about this is 2 of the guys who've gotten religion on this, House Appropriations Committee Chairman Dwight Evans and the new Speaker designee Keith McCall, are 2 of the lone holdouts from the 2005 pay raise, the infamous 2005 pay raise, who refused to reimburse the state for the so-called unvouchered expense checks they took 3 years ago. But they are now leading this charge saying, well, it's tough times, people are suffering, we can't possibly take this horrible raise while our constituents are feeling such pain.
And I think it needs to be put in perspective, too, that the House Democratic Caucus has been reeling over the past year from a series of disclosures related to Bonusgate.
We're going to come
so
to
here
that.
they're trying to take the positive step and get the publicity.
All right, we're deep inside the activities of the Pennsylvania legislature. More on that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. I'm talking with John Micek and Brad Bumsted, reporters all who are chatting with me about the legislature. We're into this business of the COLA and whether the legislators will return it. Their leaders, Democratic leaders in the House are, as I think they've summarized, lots of pressure on other members to give back the checks. The difference, I guess, we're talking about, just the 2.8%, right, Brad?
That's correct.
That's what we're talking about. All right. Look, the other big story coming up, we have 2 big stories, I think, as we move into the new year. One will be the deficit and where that goes. The other one, of course, is Bonusgate. Now, the Attorney General, John Micek, has said that there will be additional indictments. He has said that. This isn't a question anymore. Who gets indicted is another matter. How big do you think this is going to be?
Josh, I mean, it's not being privy to the machinations of the grand jury. I hesitate to speculate, but you know, they've picked off most of the so-called low-hanging fruit with a couple of exceptions of Mike Vian, the former minority whip, who was a gigantic target, and Representative Sean Ramley, former state rep from Beaver County, who also was arrested. There's nowhere to go but up from there. But, you know, gosh, who knows?
Yeah. Brad, big story?
It's going to be a huge story in 2009. I think, you know, between that and when the federal verdict comes in on Fumo, Senator Vince Fumo, who's on trial for corruption charges in U.S. District Court in Philadelphia, between the 2 of those, they have the potential to really rock the Capitol, because I think, and again, there's no way to tell because John notes, I mean, this is all secret in terms of the grand jury, but I think we're going to see big numbers of people be indicted at one time. And my hunch is that Corbett would probably like to wrap it up.
The he here is Tom Corbett, the Attorney General.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
That Corbett would like to wrap this up in the next round and get everybody. Now, that may not be
John
possible.
Micek,
Just in time for the 2010 gubernatorial,
yeah,
right?
You just anticipated where I'm going to. Look, despite all the criticisms of the Attorney General about launching a partisan investigation, the voters of the state didn't seem to mind.
Oh, no, they reelected him, you know, not by a huge margin over John Morgan, but comfortably enough, excuse me, and a larger victory than his margin over Jim Eisenhower in 2004. But, I mean, Brad's right. This is going to be monster, because keep in mind the original Bonusgate 12 are going to trial starting from January 19th or something like that. 10 of the 12 are going to trial.
So it's a full employment bill for reporters and analysts, covering these
and defense
trials.
attorneys.
And defense attorneys.
And, you know, goodness knows who's going to flip and what's going to come out in court, and you know, who knows.
But Brad, look, covered politics as long as anybody in this state. There is huge pressure on him to bring down some Republicans. And he has been focusing on Republicans. I mean, all things being even, would you, without getting, I don't want you to get way out on a limb, but do you think it's reasonable to think that some Republicans will be indicted?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you agree with that?
Yes.
I mean, where this all goes, I think we're going to have to find out. But I agree. I think that's going to be a huge story. And we're going to start, probably in January, the gubernatorial election in 2010. And there is no way, John, is there any way to sort of separate the Bonescape from the...
I mean, look, Tom Corbett hung his hat in his 2008 re-elect on, as this fighter of public corruption.
Right.
He's going to do the exact same thing, as soon as he declares for 2010, whenever that is. It'll be impossible for him to separate his image from this case. Yeah.
You agree?
I agree, and I think that you can say that it's politics. His opponents say he's just done Democrats so far. But I think as we get into 2009 and have more perspective on it, you may see Republicans involved there. It may look more even-handed to his critics. But, yeah, this is clearly going to be a boost to his ability to run for governor.
I don't know that voters make a distinction necessarily.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're talking about, well, gee whiz, the Democrats are complaining that they haven't targeted Republicans. But the voters just look at them of a piece, and all they see is Tom Corbett fighting the Harrisburg establishment.
Yeah.
That's true. And I think that Corbett, no matter how much anybody says that he's playing politics and all of this, he's the first attorney general, in my memory, since we've had elected attorney generals, who has aggressively gone after corruption in the state legislature.
Right.
You have not seen that from any of them.
It's been the federal government that has led most of these previous indictments, right?
That's correct.
All right. Well, look, as always, I want to thank you for coming on. Great update. All right, Marcellus Shale, what's that all about? Stay with us, and you'll find out.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, Lou D'Amico joins me. He's the Executive Director of the Independent Oil and Gas Association. Lou, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Terry.
Look, I want to talk a little bit about something called Marcellus Shale. I mean, there have been a lot of news reports about it in the last couple of months, and thought it might be a good idea for you to come on and explain what it is and what it's all about so our viewers have an idea about it. Let's start with Marcellus Shale. Someone joked and said it sounds like a player on a sports team. I don't know if you heard that one.
Yes, I have.
but seriously, what is Marcellus Shale?
Marcellus Shale is a formation. It's from 5,000 to 7,000 feet in most of the state. It runs the main area of the exploration right now is running from the extreme southwestern corner of Pennsylvania to the extreme northeastern part of the state.
So it's deep underground.
It's deep underground. It is a formation that we've known about forever. The question is, how do we get gas out of it?
So in other words, the construct and the pressure and the composition of the shale itself produces natural gas. Do I have that right?
The gas is in place. We know that. The question is, how do you get it out?
So the question is, how do you get it out? All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. All right. Technologically, how do you get it out?
Most of the wells that are going to be drilled are going to be horizontal wells, where we drill down to a certain depth and we literally make a hard turn and go straight out into the formation. There'll be also some vertical wells. But the main feature of Marcellus Shale is how we treat the well after it's done, and that is the completion or hydraulic fracturing, which I'm sure you've heard the term. Hydraulic fracturing is taking a high-pressure volume of water, pumping it back into the formation, literally cracking the formation. In that water is a stream of sand. We will put sand in. The sand is for proppant at the end of the frac job. Mm-hmm. As we relieve the pressure, bring water back, the sand remains in place and holds the formation open, holds the fracture open.
All right. Now, I'm familiar with the fact that particularly out in the southwestern part of the state, natural gas has been produced for a long time. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, less so, I guess, in the southeast. Am I right about that?
That's correct. Southwestern Pennsylvania, we've been doing it for over 100 years.
Yeah, and in fact, I know people that have given up their land, the mining rights, if that's the right term. You'll have to help me out. Well, and they've actually drilled on their own land. I mean, that's not uncommon out in the Southwest, is it?
That's correct. And even in the northwestern Pennsylvania, there are people actually in the city of Erie who've drilled wells on their own for their own heat.
Wow. So, okay. Now, what is the advantage of this to our state, let's say?
The advantage is twofold. Number one, Pennsylvania only produces about 26% of the natural gas we use here. Mm-hmm. So anything else we bring in has to come in from the Southwest or from the Far West or from Canada. To get here, we have pipeline costs, transportation costs. By supplying a larger and larger proportion of our own natural gas here in state, you eliminate some of that transportation cost. And it not only affects Pennsylvania, but it affects the national economy because we become a supplier. Gas that before had to come to Pennsylvania may be going to other places now for supply. Yeah. The other thing that's very important is the job creation and economic benefit there, and that's what I'm pretty excited about. I'm a native Pennsylvanian. I've been here in the oil and gas industry for 36 years, graduate of Penn State, and it's exciting for once to see jobs coming into this state instead of leaving. I've watched too many young people who can't find jobs in Pennsylvania go elsewhere, and this is an opportunity that we're really excited about.
Any estimate about how many jobs it would produce?
To give you an example, in the Fort Worth area, the Barnett Shale, which many people believe the Marcellus ultimately will be very similar to the Barnett. In the last several years, there's been something like 55,000 new jobs created in the Fort Worth area on this Barnett Shale. To put it in perspective, the Marcellus is roughly 20 times the areal extent of the Barnett, and it'll have this impact throughout the Commonwealth.
All right, we're talking with Lou D'Amico about Marcellus Shale. We'll be back. We'll explore that subject. That's a good way to put it in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're talking about Marcellus Shale. Pennsylvania is literally sitting on a large quantity, if that's the way to put it, of potential natural gas development. There's a couple of issues, big issues. One is the taxation problem. How does that play into this?
One of the things we're looking at this time is this whole project, the whole exploration of Marcellus Shale was in its infancy. We only have a couple of hundred wells so far drilled and completed in the shale, and the amount of production out of that is pretty slim.
Right.
So any kind of taxation that goes on to the natural gas industry, people are saying, "Oh, let's tax the Marcellus." Well, the reality is it's going to be the existing industry that's going to bear the brunt of that. And it's unfortunate because we're sitting here with a very borderline economics in the oil and gas industry in Pennsylvania. We're the third most active drilling state in the country, yet our production is only 15th. So it's a real tight margin. And it could be devastating to the existing producing community. And that's roughly 10,000 direct jobs, 15,000 indirect.
Let's talk about the environmental. I'll get your view on this, on the environmental impact of doing this. I mean, ultimately, that comes into play, I guess, with environmental regulations in the state. What's your sense about that?
Well, I think, first of all, let me address the environmental impact. Natural gas drilling has very little impact on the environment. There's temporary surface impact where you build the locations to drill the wells. But Pennsylvania laws are very strict on what you can do and how you do it. So the groundwater is protected. Right. We're very well regulated for erosion and sedimentation control, spill prevention, all that sort of thing. DEP does an excellent job of regulating those things. Unfortunately, part of the hype that you'd mentioned before about the Marcellus Shale has attracted a lot of attention from the environmental community. It's also attracted a lot of attention from folks in northeastern Pennsylvania who have not experienced drilling operations. And people tend to be afraid of something they don't understand. So there's concerns that have been raised about whether we're going to be taking their groundwater and all these impacts and what's it going to mean to people. So there's where the concerns are, and I think possibly being general about it, I think DEP has somewhat overreacted in how they've approached the Marcellus Shale, and right now they have us pretty much shut down. I mean, we have so many regulatory hurdles to get through, and the department has yet to come up with a comprehensive plan on how to deal with these things. We're working with them constantly. I will credit the governor's office. They're making an effort to intercede and assure that things are done, environmentally soundly, right, but also to make sure that.
There's a question of expediting these requests. Is that more fundamentally the problem than whether, from your point of view, whether you've met the regulation or not? Well,
I think for the most part, existing regulations we meet as a matter of course. I mean, there's not a problem there. It's this concept that perhaps there needs to be additional regulation or different types of regulation for Marcellus Shale.
Okay. All right. Hey, thanks for coming in. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.